friendly disclaimer. If you don't like what you see or hear here, then you can leave and you may unsub if you want. What's up, everyone? It's me again. And no, this is not going to be another diary for now. As a matter of fact, I have been doing a little bit better. A little bit, okay? But other than that will be explained in the next diary, unfortunately. There is no escaping the serious dramatic stuff, okay? But yeah, enough about that for now. I just want to chill out and talk to you all about my experience with the Marvel vs. Capcom fighting collection. And I'm not talking in the collection, in the game itself, because, well, technically, I would continue to still play the games and everything on that collection and all, but it's just Marvel, but on modern consoles, and on Capcom Fighting Collection 1's interface and everything. But anyways, I'd like to talk to you all about my experience with the Marvel vs. Capcom franchise as a whole, way back in the day. From way back in the day, all the way until the present time. Well, it all started back in like 2007, maybe 2008. We used to be at a very old apartment back at Nuss City, an area in Egypt. And back in the day, there were no super smartphones and no bigger router and no fast internet, and there wasn't a lot of things that we weren't ever, being led to do. And most of the games that I have known would probably be known by my dad buying them for me, So, how did I know Marvel vs. Capcom? The very first I've known about Capcom and Mega Man. And Capcom, I've known about it from way back in the day when I was playing Mega Man X4. And back then, we had a very old PC that was like a Windows XP and 7 kind of PCs that were lying around, no Windows 8s, none of that shit. And before knowing about full PC versions, there were the portable RIP version, where you take away most data and put the game on the internet with it, which was quite baffling. No musics, like literally no musics. Mega Man X3 was worse. It had only like 2 musics, The stage selection theme and the Dr. King theme was playing pretty much everywhere, which again was a quite pain in the ass. Later on, I would know about Street Fighter 2 from the SNES port of Street Fighter 2 The World Warrior, and then all the way to other fighting games. But the important thing in here is Marvel vs. Capcom. I first seen Marvel vs. Capcom 2 way back on a very old iPad that we used to have from the App Store. And back then, it was quite something for me, because first off, it was Marvel and Capcom characters fighting each other, and what do you know, it had Mega Man. And that pretty much clicked with me. So I have showed this to my dad and pretty much begged him to buy the game for me back then. And eventually he bought it. And back in the day, I knew absolutely nothing about fighting. Not what our hybrid combos stand for, not what, you know, um, not what team hyper combos would be, nor any of that. And I would pretty much know most of this from the, you know, I'll pretty much know how to play most of the game from the default touch screen controls. Because back in the day, you know, like back in the day, if you want to play a fighting game with technically modern controls, you have the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 iOS port to help you with that. You know, a button for one button for punch, another button for you know, right kick, a button for a special, flick it on the side, flick it at whatever side you want for different specials, and a button for assist. Flick it to the right, and you make a crossover change. Flick it down, and it's a team hybrid combo. Yeah, a lot of these I've eventually learned about it. And to be honest, it was quite fun, at least for a while. And the fact that you have had to play through the game, get the points so that you can be able to unlock the motherfucking Mega Man or any other character you want to. It was a bit pain in the ass, but hey, I was a kid back then, and I used to enjoy most of that, and that's what was important. Later on, I would know about most of the other Marvel vs. Capcom games, thanks to the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 intro itself. When I used to look at it on the iOS. Marvel Superhero, X-Men Children of the Atom, Marvel Superhero Street Fighter, and Marvel vs. Capcom 1. Back then I started with Marvel vs. Capcom 1. And well, what did I see? My boy Mega Man, of course. And I used to. Back then I was like a huge Mega Man fan, Mega Man X fan. At least after discovering the original versions of almost each game. I first played that, it was like a completely different game. No modern controls, no specials to be done in a simple way. Yeah. And before knowing how to do commands and whatsoever, it was all about selecting that auto move, making the full game easy, so and that was pretty new at emulation. Very new to the point that I didn't know that I could just configure most of my controls. Because controls for the very old main version had to really suck. And the process to play most of these games used to suck as well. Because again, back then, most of the simple downloads that we would just do nowadays was not an option. Which again, used to cause a little bit of a handful of problems for no reason. Now, eventually, sometimes I would get the hang of the specials, and sometimes I wouldn't be able to do anything at all. I'll pretty much get my ass kicked most of the time. And well, I gotta tell you, it was quite something for me, you know. But hey, I mean, back in the day, it used to have the old, which was perfect for me. Again, I was still on game cover for most of this stuff. And playing it with only me was pretty much the only way that I used to know about most of these games. And then later on, I was to discover Marvel superheroes. And, well, after Marvel vs. and as a matter of fact, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and Marvel superheroes, and later on in children and where to be my very first discovery of Olivia Martin, aka Farlock. Yeah. And I'm not gonna lie, as a kid, yeah, I've got lots of songs. A lot of them. But in any case, it was a pretty good experience playing those arcade originals, not knowing about all of the ports back then, nor even being able to know how to do a simple air combo or a simple combo in any sort. And back in the day, it was just looking up the move lists for some characters that I want, especially when it comes to, well, almost a simple moveset back in, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo Super Shoots. Back then, I used to find most of the charge movesets were quite atrocious. But hey, it isn't as atrocious as trying to do a 360 motion, whether in the middle of an air combo or, in the middle of a combo itself. It is still a chore to do. And later on, it would start to click to me, one by one. Eventually, we've got our asses moved into here, the current area. And eventually, I was pretty much able to play a couple of other games like X-Men vs. Street Fighter. Sometimes a lot more Marvel vs. Capcom 1, more Marvel vs. Street Fighter, and so on. And believe it or not, back then, I really wanted to play Marvel vs. Capcom 2 so bad. Like, at some point I have kind of known about the Dreamcast original. But back then I didn't know how to emulate the arcade original of it. And since then, I have pretty much stuck myself into, just playing a random Mugen game out of it. And when exploring those Mugen games, yeah, disappointment ran into me. But I mean, it was a Marvel vs. Capcom Mugen game, so along with Marvel superheroes as well. Because again, back then, a simple download to the arcade original wasn't even an option. Especially that we didn't used to have any router or any kind of landline wire in our area back then. I'm dead fucking serious. And it took us like almost an entire century just to get a fucking landline wire. Then after getting that landline wire, we got most of the communications in, and eventually we were able to, get that wire connected into the house, and eventually a router into the house. And man, oh man, was it almost a dream come true. At least at some point. Because my parents used to be assholes about most of the download stuff. Yeah, it is still quite a pain, even though we have like 600 gigs inside our quota, but you sometimes won't believe how the fuck does it get depleted so bad. Oh well. Anyways, at some point I have gotten to discover the PlayStation 1 ports of those games. And the first of it was to play Marvel vs. Capcom 1 in its PlayStation port, and then Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter in the PlayStation port. And back when I discovered those games, they felt like an entirely new game, none of that tag or assist, assists still kind of exist in a way, but yeah, they weren't there. But hey, at least I learned how to do some simple air combos back then. Not to mention, and then at some point I have started playing some more X-Men vs. Street Fighter, the PS1 port. And the same goes for Marvel Superheroes, the PS1 port. Most of my time with the MVC franchise later on, after moving to the Fifth Settlement, was presented to the PlayStation 1 ports of those games. Even though they are pretty much way too weak compared to their arcade counterparts. But I've had quite fond memories with them. And eventually I would get to emulate PlayStation 1 games onto my phone. And believe it or not, it took me a little while to get used to having touch controls and whatsoever. And eventually, I was able to get things working. Marvel vs. Capcom 1, the PS1 port, all the way to X-Men Children of the Atom. Why the hell not? After all. And it was like a dream come true. And believe it or not, this was probably also the times that I have started to play these games on higher difficulties, especially the max difficulty. Surely at first I got my ass handed to me many times. But hey, with a lot more practice and more nerdiness into most of this, it would eventually click to me, and since then I used to be able to beat up most of those games without any continues on that max difficulty. With the majority of those playing as Marvel characters more than Capcom characters, cause let's be real, Capcom characters in some of these old titles really sucked ass when it comes to chaining and air combo starters and whatsoever. You would pretty much rely on the hypers and specials more than the fast, quick and balanced gameplay of the Marvel characters. And yeah, I gotta tell you, they really used to be. But again, these used to be some good memories. X-Men Children of the Atom Zone, however, yeah. It was the first of its time, but god, did it suck ass. And well, it just can't, you know, yeah. This was just that bad. It was so bad that I couldn't even be able to beat some of those without toning down the difficulty. Like, literally. Sometimes most of the simple games can't be beaten up like how you used to. Meanwhile, but overall, I used to have quite a great experience with the Marvel vs. Capcom games. And then at some point, I was at like pretty much a frenzy when it comes to fighting games. And especially, I used to have quite a collection of games back in the day, starting from most of the classic fighting games all the way to eventually getting some newer fighting games. And that's where I was able to reach Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. The gameplay was shockingly different, and it took me quite some time to get used to it. And that's where I have met and got into most of the things, or used to, back then. Starting with good old Phoenix Wright and his Ace Attorney franchise that is full of really, really, really long storytelling. Like, you could literally fall asleep while playing some of these games. Sure, the music and some of the characters' looks would keep you on your toes. And I'm totally not referring to all the titties. Yep, all the titties in this game. And Maya getting herself kidnapped many fucking times. Oh dear. Then there is the Darkstalkers. The Darkstalkers series. Probably got into that from Namco's Capcom more than Marvel vs. Capcom. I don't know. And I was gonna get myself into Resident Evil, but meh. Then you've got Dante, which again was a completely different experience, especially with my entire experience with the Devil May Cry franchise being with only that one really interesting reboot of the franchise. It was called DMC. Yeah, that at least how we used to take it. Basically the one with the completely different looking Dante. Not Devil May Cry 5 Dante, but basically think of it as literally GTA Dante. And Devil May Cry 5. Literally. Meanwhile, there will of course be most of the English voices for some of the characters that I used to know. Like frickin' Felicia, Hisenko, and pretty much not Morrigan, because Morrigan's voice back then kinda sucked, you know. Then you've got Ryu's English voice, you've got Chun-Li's English voice, Mike Hagar and his never-ending supply of badassness, Hulk and his modified new voice, Tony with his voice that is super recognizable, and lots of other mentions. Not to mention discovering the tag air combos kind of thing was quite another discovery for me. It is as if you give a kid some sugar and he goes on, and then he lets loose, lets his ass very loose. And then there was this weird card uh, type of mode where you basically put some cards that would, change stats, which was meh at the very best. Eventually comes in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, and boy oh boy, did I have quite a time with it back then. When I first seen that very first trailer of that game, I was like, whoa, Mega Man X. Okay, it's Ryu fighting against Tony and a woman that I haven't seen. But then comes in the real deal, which is the story trailer for Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Not only that, but the story demo of it. Boy, oh boy, I used to be so hyped to actually get this game. And I'm not even kidding. Like, when I've seen that story demo, I was super hyped into that. It felt like it's gonna be a dream come true. We're finally gonna be getting a Marvel vs. Capcom games that's featuring an MCU kind of representation, or at least that's what I have thought. And back then I couldn't even get my hands on the demo, so naturally your only source is to watch video. And no, pirating some of these games unfortunately wasn't an option, because again, internet issues. Yeah, internet quota and management issues were on there. And from watching especially a long video that featured the entire story, I gotta say, it was getting better and better. At least when I used to be a fan of the entire thing. Cause, yeah, back then, having a game like this that is remotely close to real life stuff like movies was awesome. Marvel vs. Capcom was an MCU treatment, and MCU characters like Gamora, Ultron, and T'Challa, like the fact that you could get most of them and having some of the other Marvel characters in a way that is closer to the MCU treatment, yeah, it was like a dream come true. And hey, Mega Man X finally can get to be in there. Zero is on there, and it was probably the only game that probably had Morrigan's best voice ever. I'm not fucking joking. I fucking loved Morrigan's voice in MVCI. And probably the first time you would ever hear Jeddah in English. And then you got Franquist, and boy, was he insane. Well, quite insane back in motherfucking Marvel vs. Capcom 3. In MVCI, however, he got nerfed. And of course, a whole new other kind of voice for my boy Dante. And of course, many others. Hell, even Sigma gets to be as a playable DLC. So, there were lots to say. Eventually, a long time has passed, and after receiving what was probably the most unexpected, amazing gift from a Twitter friend back then, he basically has gifted me a bunch of games, including Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite itself. And let me tell you, when that time had came and that friend actually gifted me the game. As a matter of fact, let me give you the story about it real quick. Like back then, I used to be on Twitter and used to be probably befriending most role players and whatsoever. And I met that guy in a group chat, alright? So we were talking, and I saw him telling me something on the lines of, "Hey, what are the 4 games that you would want me to get, or you would want to get at some point?" And I pretty much have, and I was like, you know that. And I was like, yeah, I don't really want to answer that because I would be getting them, which was true. I mean, to pirate any of these games, it was like taking almost an entire week, or maybe if the internet was, decent enough to let you at least have it after an entire day. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, like I pretty much said, I wouldn't be able to get some stuff. And he said something along the lines of, I can give you some games if you want. And I pretty much jokingly said, okay. And I was like, okay, then would you please bring me Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, Street Fighter 5, Tekken 7, and Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, please? Like, I pretty much said that jokingly. And, well, and he was like, oh, okay. Okay, these are pretty good picks. And, well, since then, I was just pretending that I didn't hear any of that. Cause, yeah, the idea of someone giving you video games so suddenly, especially after you ask them, was was an out of the question kind of thing, cause it rarely ever happens, let alone to be gifted one game. Like, yeah. But then, it literally happened. A few minutes later, I've got a bunch of... But then, like, at first, we were to add each other on Steam. Because that's how I was playing most of these games from. Like, we were to add each other on Steam, alright? And basically after that little conversation, I have waited for like a few minutes, before he would respond again or some shit. And, well, it actually fucking happened. Like, it actually fucking happened. That dude was crazy enough to pay from his own credit card to give me a few fighting games. Street Fighter 5, and not just any edition of Street Fighter 5, it was the arcade edition, all the way before Luke and Akira. Tekken 7, all the way before all the way before Kunimitsu and Lydia. Then there was Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, a very standard edition at best. And I think, yeah, like that was pretty much it. NVCI, Street Fighter V, and Tekken 7. Oh, and KOF 14. I wanted to play that game at some point, way before KOF 15 was announced and whatsoever. Like the fact that he actually brought me all those games, and I was literally getting messages and notifications on my Steam that I have actually been gifted those games. Like, oh my fucking god, bruh. I was like, holy shit, you actually did it. You crazy motherfucker, you did it. But I didn't literally say that to him, literally, but still. Like, holy fuck. It was like a fucking dream come true back then. Like, wow. Like 4 of the fighting games that I wanted and been playing their demos to death back then? Hell to the fuck yeah. It was like a dream come true back then. But then the biggest yikes would, but then the, like, holy fuck. It was like a dream come true. It was almost like a huge celebration. Like to play lots of games that I have always wanted to play, whether it's from my relatives or from playing this shitty demo back on the PS4. It was like a dream come true. But yeah, I used to have quite problems for it, especially when I was getting most of these games one after another. And of course, those games weren't any smaller nor any better. And boy, the amount of troubles that I've had because of downloading most of them. Because after all, these were huge games, so they were slowing down the internet, so they were eating up the quota like crazy. Some of the times it was worth it, and the other times it wasn't really worth it. But in the end, I've got those games. I was playing them. Hell, I was even modding most of them, which was another great thing about PC versions of those games. They could just mod them, and the best crucial part about that is to pretty much modify the soundtrack. Like, although so eventually I was to discover and play Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, finally. And well, the first problem comes in to try and make it run properly on your PC. Then, to get used to the controls that you have got. And eventually, to play the game. And the story in the end was pretty disappointing, you know. It was probably the stupidest story that you would ever get. And with an ending that leaves a lot of fucking questions. Lots of fucking scenes that leaves a lot of questions. But I mean, hey, the novelty of having Capcom teaming up with MCU, technically MCU styled Marvel characters, was like a dream come true. And the gameplay was pretty damn good, even though it takes us back to the 2 versus 2 kinda 2 versus 2 gameplay from Marvel 2 and the others, but it was actually pretty good. But then another disappointment comes in from the soundtrack. My God, did they really put the shit on the soundtrack? When you play against the Marvel characters normally, their themes are fucking horrible. And I mean fucking horrible. And at the ending, you get to have 2 MCU styled remix from, 2 Marvel characters MCU styled remix. Spider-Man and Captain America. Yeah. Like, what the shit? Like, we could at least, couldn't we at least have the option to change Spider-Man's theme to that Arrange It Classic? Does that Arrange It Classic? And as well as for fucking Captain America? And why did they even do that to the others? Even on a goddamn unreleased, Arrange It soundtrack for Marvel characters or some shit? Like, come on, man. And most of the Capcom characters have got it worse. First off, you got the Street Fighters. And I wouldn't call them Street Fighters because it's only fucking Ryu and Chun. They both have it the worst. Like, really the worst. And then you've got motherfucking Firebrand's theme and X's theme. You would expect it to be so good. It's the Central Highway theme remix, but it's awful. Really, really awful. And that was the extent of a modern era type of remix before we've got the Smash Bros. Remix, which was ultimately fucking better. I'm not even joking. The Smash Ultimate version had outdid this theme million times, way more million times than Maverick Hunter X would fucking do. Even though it was a part of my childhood, but fuck it. The best version of Central Highway. Then you've got Zero C. I mean, it isn't as bad, but I still prefer the Marvel 3 version remix. Although, 3 characters got their themes pretty damn decent. Morgan got her theme pretty good. Dante with the Devils Never Cry remix. And Jeddah. Yeah, even Jeddah had his theme pretty decent. And Chris's theme was actually pretty good. And then you've even got Frank Quest, and holy shit, that was jammed. That was a huge fucking banger back then. Compare that to the Marvel 3 theme, it is good, but jeez, they're going bangers bazongers on that one. Really. Then you got Sigma's theme, basically a remix of his X2 first theme. Well, it doesn't have the speed from the original, but it is also not that bad. Like, in all seriousness, like, those were like the majority of the fucking a few majority of the Capcom characters had really good soundtracks, but the rest of the soundtrack is as atrocious as it can ever get. Only the title screen music and the character select theme music would be a million times better. Along with the result screen music. Literally, that's all what you can get out of the soundtrack. And you got the shitty story. Pretty horrible. But hey, the gameplay was fun, graphics were good, and that's all what matters, honestly. Like, if the gameplay good, then I honestly would still put those issues on the side. I mean, it's still Marvel, but yeah. And, well, it was the problem. And then, well, after a long time of basically things that were happening back and forth, whether it's from real life or from social media, my interest for fighting games was slowly going away. And one of the victims to get this was the Marvel franchise. And to tell you the truth, all of this took a huge hit. You know, it takes a huge hit on my nostalgia. Like, really, nostalgia took a huge hit. It is what it is for most of the time, but damn, what a shitload of fuck. And honestly, after MVCI, there was almost no hope for Marvel to come back. Until, well, this collection comes in. Not to mention, most of the time, if I would play some Marvel related stuff, it would be either from some of the ports, so it would be a selection of games with a specific type of port that I haven't played. So yeah, every now and then I would try to find a good stuff to play. Then of course came in the fighting game killing incident, and one of the series to be completely tossed away was the Marvel series. And here we are. And I'm not gonna lie. It all started pretty well, and it was still going pretty decent. Overall, my experience with the Marvel series was pretty good. It was really good. And I honestly still didn't expect that they would actually make a Marvel vs. Capcom collection. Wow. Even though it's just the old Marvel games, but still. It was pretty good. It was a pretty good move from Capcom. So the people who don't want to resort to emulation or don't have money for getting an arcade 1-up or whatever, they would now have all of these games, whether on the go, because it's on the Switch, or at your modern day console. Yeah, it was honestly a decent move. And now that I've been talking about all of this, I might I might re-download Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite and play it. Though it is still boring. It is still boring as shit nowadays. But overall, yeah. It was decent. Like things were decent back then. So, overall, my experience with the franchise was actually quite good. It had a pretty good start, a very good progression. At some point, it was falling down, and now, well, it is kind of dormant for me. Did I ever? Now, the question that I would be asked, if anyone would care enough to ask, have I ever played those games online? Well, sometimes on Fightgate, I'll fight against a bunch of random people. I fight against a bunch of random people in some of those games. And eventually, I'll get my ass kicked very hard. But did I get competitively to those games? And did I get into a tournament with those games? Unfortunately, no. And as a matter of fact, the only time that I've got, no, the only 2 times that I've ever got into a tournament was from 2 different games. One of them was Samurai Showdown 5 Special, I think, and Vampire Hunter Darkstalker's Revenge. And I'm gonna try and give a little briefing to how was my experience in that Vampire Hunter tournament. So basically at some point I was beginning to get into the Darkstalkers series by playing a little bit into some of the games. And probably the games that caught up my attention because of its soundtrack mainly was Vampire Hunter, not Darkstalker's Revenge, or Night Warriors. You know? I played that and played the Darkstalkers franchise in general, and it was a little bit quirky at first, not the best. And of course, I was maining the shit out of Morrigan, and I wouldn't probably use Felicia, Dimitri a little bit. But overall, it was a decent experience for me back then. Eventually, I have seen one of the servers that I was in that was related to fighting games or retro games or whatsoever was inside, was for Vampire Hunter. I got this tournament from seeing it in a partner server. Yeah, in a partner servers, and it was a pretty decent discovery. Although the process to register in some of these tournaments were a little bit out of hand. But I mean, hey, these were decent video games, so fuck it. And you would be wondering, how did the tournament go? At first, it was going pretty bad. And I mean really, really, really bad. Like, I've got my ass kicked, I think, on like the quarterfinal or the first preliminaries round? I don't know. But I've got my ass kicked midway. But surprisingly, I was able to fight my way through the. You know, I was able to fight my way through the loser's bracket. And after going out of the loser's bracket, I was able to fight. I was able to fight in the final round of the pretty much the finals of the entire tournament. And let me tell you, I was sweating from the side, getting nervous from the side. I'm probably having my competitive sweaty side on most of the time. I was using Morgan back then. And well, as much as I wish that I would end it with a very solid, strong darkness illusion, but luck has gotten me. And I think the one that I was playing against was probably a Bishamon user, maybe Gallo. I can't even fucking remember. Probably was Bishamon. Well, anyways, the whole match was going and we were on our final stretches. And eventually, luckily, with one single Shadow Blade, I have been able to fucking win. Like literally, I was able to fucking win that. And I'm not gonna lie, that shit was satisfying as all hell. Like really, it was satisfying as all hell. And even though it's a tournament from a small server and not a lot of people would be watching, well, most of the stuff back in the day, but then it was going pretty nice. It was going pretty nice. Then comes in the second tournament, which was for Samurai Showdown 5 Special. And keep in mind, I was getting in most of these games with zero fucking training and zero background. And it was like pretty. So getting into most of these games with no training or no knowledge or background or whatsoever was kind of a stupid advantage back then. So eventually I got my ass kicked, but this time entirely. At first, I got my ass kicked, so I was sent to the loser's bracket. And pretty much at the finals of that loser's bracket, I got my ass handed to me. It was a really, really cruel fatality move. It was like probably a shitty letdown. I mean, heck, you can't win them all. There were, of course, other tournaments that I would be getting in from another server, and they were decent memories. They were pretty decent memories. As a matter of fact, I think I might rewatch that vampire, I think I might rewatch that Vampire Hunter tournament again. Yeah, it's probably just gloating on my glory at that time. But it was only one time. Like literally only one time, and I get my ass kicked. That's it. And well, I think that's pretty much about it. Yeah. That concludes my experience with the Marvel franchise and pretty much a few other stories that were related to it. Honestly, this franchise and a few others were the reason why I was into fighting games so much. Although ironically, Also, ironically, those franchises had to be completely tossed away and, you know, thrown to the trash due to the social media. Yeah, it only takes one small thing to destroy something that you've used to love from childhood all the way to your adulthood. And that is another violent truth. That violent truth is if you're not careful with, do not underestimate some of the things sometimes. No matter how small they are, do not underestimate them. Or else they have the power to completely destroy what you have loved way back in the day. And believe me, it shows. And it shows a lot. Well, that's pretty much about it. And I'm gonna see you all later on. If you're watching this far, then deeply thank you for listening. For real this time, farewell.